So our final speaker on our end of the day plenary at this conference is Jonathan Neale, who I've known on and off for many years, but he's here as RS21 speaker today. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Romy. I'm going to stand up, which I feel a bit of a prune after you've sat down, but somehow it's the only way I know to keep the energy going.
Get off the squeaky board.
Okay, I'm going to start where I'm going to start as a Marxist and a socialist. Now, where you start as a Marxist and a socialist isn't with Marxism. It's not with what the socialists think. It's not with what's the socialist argument. As a Marxist, you start with the material reality. What is the material reality? And you look at it from the point of view of the great majority. Sometimes from the point of view of the 90%, sometimes from the point of view of the 95%, sometimes from the point of view of the 99%, because the top 10%, they flop around a bit. But you look at it from the point of view of the working class and the farmers, the great majority of society. We look at climate change, and what do we face in material reality? We face just what Fiona said we face. War, famine, refugees, storms. We face something, it's not abstract. If you want to see what the combination of climate change, drought, and famine, and the resultant war do, and enormous numbers of refugees due to a place over 40 years, look at Darfur, where farmers and herders have been killing each other for a generation for disappearing grass. That is what we will face in different forms in many, many parts of the world. That's the material reality. There's also material reality about what we have to do about that, how we can stop that happening or halt it. What we have to do is very simple. And we could do it globally, we could get it done in 12 years. We can do it with 1 million workers for our country's share in 20 years. 2 million workers could do it in 12 years. We can do it in 12 years globally. Basically, we need to do 3 things, 3 big things. One is cover the entire globe with renewable energy, so it's the only form of energy we use. The second thing is to insulate all the houses, all the public buildings, all the businesses so they use much less energy. The third thing is to change the transport system so it's overwhelmingly public transport, buses and trains, and so it runs on renewable energy. If we do that, we can cut our carbon dioxide emissions by 95% globally. There are many other little bits and pieces which will make a difference, but those are the 3 main things we need to do. Anybody who has thought about this problem at all knows that's what we need to do. It's not out of some socialist playbook. It's dedicated, it's conditioned by the nature of physics. That is what we need to do. And that is how we will stop global warming. I know this. David Cameron knows it. Obama knows it. ExxonMobil knows it. Shell know it. The Koch brothers know it. Everybody who's bothered to think about it knows that that's what has to be done. And that knowledge is what produces what the ruling classes of the world are doing. Because when they look at the solution, 3 things hold them back. First of all, the corporations that will die in a renewable energy world as corporations. If you want to understand British government policy on foreign policy or on climate change, the largest corporation in the world by sales, Shell, is half British. The second largest corporation in the world by sales, the 4th largest corporation in the world, is British Petroleum. That tells you what you need to know. That's the first thing. The second thing is, everybody knows that to do anything about it will require massive government expenditure. Will require a decisive break with austerity and neoliberalism. No other way of doing it. And that, all the leaders of the world and the ruling classes are wedded to the idea that the market cannot solve the problems. They have spent 30 years drilling that into us, frightening that into us, and they dare not give it up. So they dare not act to save the climate. The third thing is they are all in desperate competition with each other. And none of the centers of national capital, not the British or the German or the Chinese or the American, wants to make the necessary sacrifices on their own, and they cannot agree. So they refuse to do anything about it. What that means is that the question of climate change is a class struggle. I don't mean that in some abstract sense. That's what I'm going to declare it. What I mean is that there's a tiny minority, the 1%, who, because of where they stand in society, cannot or will not do anything. And there are the rest of us who are slowly realizing that we desperately need them to do something. And it is a struggle about who pays and who suffers. That's the nature of that struggle. Now, as we embark on that struggle, we have to be really clear about the weaknesses on our side. When I say our side, I don't mean the people in the room. I mean the large majority of the world's population. What are our weaknesses? And our weaknesses are, first of all, this issue is a time-lapse one. We need to act now before it gets here. Secondly, I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound mean, but I think it does have to be said. This is an issue that has been brought to us by the environmentalists, for which the solutions are socialist. But the socialists haven't brought the issue to us. The environmentalists have brought the issue to us. And that means it comes with environmentalist solutions, and I'll be brutal, it won't work. Instead of, socialist solutions that would work. All the solutions that most people have are environmentalist solutions. Now, all credit to the scientists, climate scientists of the world, and all credit to the green organizations and the environmental organizations for telling the whole world about this. But we've got some space to make up before we can convince the world that we have to do it together, we have to do it collectively, we have to take collective control of our energy. In addition to that, the left, globally, boy are we weak. Boy are we fragmented. Boy are we demoralized. Boy are we small in numbers. Even where we're big in numbers. We're small in numbers compared to the task. We have to be quite honest about this. And can I have a bit more orange juice? We have to be honest about what we face there. And I'm not going to talk about how to solve all of those problems, but I'm going to talk about one of them before I finish. Before I talk about that, though, I want to say something about how Marxists and socialists operate. We don't have an analysis which we save and polish until the moment of catastrophe hits. We develop our knowledge, our theory, our understanding, our ability to deal with the world by throwing ourselves into the movements of resistance. The movements of resistance over climate change are nowhere near big enough, but they're a good deal bigger than the number of active socialists in this country. There is an enormous space for us to get stuck into. And we will only, if we hit the moment of horror, we will only be listened to if we have been fighting over this for years. If everyone has already heard our arguments about what the solutions are. If we have the respect of the people who know us for having thought about this. Otherwise, we are going to be lost. So we put ourselves in the movement with all of its weaknesses, all of its chaos, all of its joy. We put ourselves in there. I'm going to end with two things. One is, I said the left is very weak. There's an underlying reason, I think, why the left is very weak. And it's connected to why the unions are very weak and why the working class is very weak. And it's that we have lost the vision of an alternative. We have lost the vision of a different way to live. For hundreds of years, in different forms, different groups of people have been fighting for a different world. In the wake of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Russian dictatorship on the one hand, and of the obscene joke that things like the Labour Party and the Social Democratic parties have become. In the wake of that, we've lost the habit of talking about an alternative. So I'm going to talk about very briefly what I think socialism would be. The first thing to say is utterly, joyously democratic. Nothing, nothing, nothing like the old dictatorships of Russia or of China. We do not want the socialism of the interrogator. We want the socialism of the prisoners. That's the first thing. Secondly, democratic at work. At the moment we are allowed to vote, but from the time you get to work or school in the morning until you go home, you are in a dictatorship. And you know it from the way they look at you when you come in 2 minutes late. You are in a dictatorship and you are bullied, and that dictatorship forms every part of our society. It is repeated in the old people's homes, it is repeated in the children's playgrounds, it is repeated in the football teams, and it's repeated everywhere. So we break that, we elect our bosses at work, we elect representatives at work who are our democratic government, who are recallable at any time. It would be a world of equality in which everybody has what they need. And what everybody has is equal. It would be a world in which we take care of each other. This was brought home to me, and I'm almost finished now. I'm a much more hopeful person than I was on Wednesday. Because on this Thursday night, I went to a demonstration in Oxford, which was like nothing I've ever seen before. The president of the Oxford Union, Ben Sullivan, has been arrested for rape and for attempted rape, was out on bail, refused to resign from the presidency of the Oxford Union, was supported in refusing to do so by the university and by the Oxford Union. 240 people came for a vigil outside the Oxford Union on Thursday night. And it was very quiet and it was very nonviolent, and then we sat down in the road, and then survivor after survivor after survivor after survivor got up and said over and over again, when I was raped, when I was abused, I told nobody because I thought no one would stand by me. And now we are all standing by each other. It was, I cannot describe the feeling. It was extraordinary. And what I carried away from that was that I would say today that socialism is also that we stand by each other, that we take care of each other, that the forces of this world that would stop us taking care of each other, we have to fight them and we have to deal with them. But also, just to add, for climate change, we have to take care of each other across the world because we all breathe one air. But by an accident of evolution, we are the dominant species on this planet. We have responsibility and stewardship for every living thing on the surface of this planet. And we are going to lose at least a third of the species if we let climate change go forward. We don't know, and this is the last 3 sentences, we don't know how long we have before we hit true suffering. But it's a very good guess, looking around me, that it's within the lifetime of most of the people in this room. When it hits, I want you to be strong enough to gather people around you to fight for kindness and for taking care of each other. And I want you to be strong in that way because you've been doing it for a long time before we get there. Thank you.
Very big thank you to Fiona, to Claire, to Jonathan. We know, we've been reminded of the urgency of what lies ahead of us. We've been reminded of the people who are suffering and may not survive right now if we don't help them along the way. And we have been reminded that we need to feel the love. And as I always say to my daughter by text message when I'm just trying to test if she's still breathing wherever she is a revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having. If we're going to feel the love and support each other, we need to have a good time, look after each other and work hard together alongside each other. So thank you very much. Thank you SR. Thank you Iris. Messages. I think Liam is going to just do a few messages right now. We are just at our time. This has been a fantastic plenary session. It wasn't billed as a Q&A. But
precisely 2 messages. A socialist resistance comrade George Thompson is being very seriously victimised at work. George has brought a petition with him, and particularly anybody who holds any sort of union position, if you could sign it, George will be standing here at the end of the session. George, just want to wave to people so they know what they look like. Okay. Secondly, although there's been a high degree of consensus today, I think there's also a need for theoretical exploration of many of the issues. And in the best traditions of the British Labour movement, I notice there's a pub about 200 yards that way called the Northumberland Arms.
Could I also just say, if you want to get involved in action, the Reclaim Shakespeare Company, week Sunday, we're organising a fighting forward to kick BP out of the British Museum to end sponsorship of the arts by fossil fuels.
Brilliant. Can you make sure that none of you go without a big bundle of these, and I will see you and I'll be looking out for you all on Saturday the 21st.
Just about this demonstration, it is a very important demonstration. It does have a green perspective on it. It calls for investing in green jobs, and it will be followed in 2-3 weeks after that by strikes by quite a number